Welcome to MojoPlays, and today we're taking a look at the 10 weakest, most worthless Pokemon no one wants on their team. Before we begin, we publish new videos all week long, so be sure to subscribe to MojoPlays and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. Magikarp, Pokemon Red and Blue. Now, we can understand why some folks even want Magikarp on their team. Every Pokemon trainer knows about the potential Magikarp has, as it can transform into Gyarados, one of the most powerful Pokemon you can get in Red and Blue. But we can't ignore the amount of suffering we have to endure because of how useless Magikarp is 90% of the time. How many fishermen have we fought who were loaded up with Magikarp that only knew Splash? And we all know how useless Tackle is, so what real purpose does Magikarp have outside of the time investment for Gyarados? None, that's what. Unown, Pokemon Gold and Silver. For a Pokemon as eerie and mysterious as Unown, one would think that these little guys would hold some amount of untold power, right? You could not be further from the truth, and it is rather upsetting. Unown is the only Pokemon in the entire series that cannot be taught any other moves. Not through TMs and HMs, not through breeding, not even through tutoring. The only move it has at its disposal is Hidden Power. Again, sounds like something that could cause a solid amount of damage. Alas, no. Hidden Power is dependent on the type of the user's Pokemon, so its usefulness is very circumstantial, thus making Unown about as valuable as a Woobat. Wurmple, Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. Look, we have nothing against Wurmple. Wurmple's adorable, and every generation needs its own adorable Caterpie type, you know? Sadly, Wurmple is just a waste of a catch unless you're strictly catching it to fill the Pokedex. In addition to its awful pool of learnable moves, Wurmple fails in providing a decent set of stats even for the early game. If you're that confident in investing for a Dustox or a Beautyfly, maybe consider catching a Wurmple, but if you're beyond the first gym already, it's honestly not worth the effort. Chingling, Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. We tried to refrain from putting baby Pokemon on this list. After all, these guys are inherently weaker forms of better Pokemon. However, Chingling is the worst of the bunch. Most would quickly point towards the low stats and abysmally weak Learn set. We, on the other hand, take issue in the effort that's required to get it to evolve into Chimico. The only way Chingling evolves is if you get it to the max level of happiness, which means letting it hold and or use items in battle, teaching it certain moves, use items on it almost constantly, even if it doesn't need it. It's a lot of upkeep just to obtain a Chimico, and even then, the evolution doesn't do much to bolster its stats. Woobat, Pokemon Black and White. Woobats are perhaps the worst of the early game Pokemon, as it blends the two worst things about Wurmple and Chingling into one creature. In addition to the poor stats and Learn set, Woobat can only evolve when your friendship with it is at a high enough level, and that's just to get Swoobat. What's even more frustrating are its passive abilities, Unaware, Klutz, and Simple. These abilities render stat changes useless to Woobat, while also making Woobat weaker to a Pokemon's attacks should they alter stats mid-fight. As for Klutz, Woobat cannot be given any items to hold or use in combat. That said, what is even the point of this Pokemon then? Scatterbug, Pokemon X and Y. Oh look, look, it's another token Caterpie like for a whole different generation of Pokemon, and unfortunately, it makes Wurmple look like a god tier Pokemon. Admittedly, Scatterbug is a little bit like Weedle, with its slightly higher defense compared to most early game Pokemon. However, its stats in HP, special attack, special defense, and speed are downright pathetic. On top of that, it can only learn Tackle, String Shot, Bug Bite, and Stun Spore. We understand the small move pool is only because Scatterbug evolves when reaching level 9 and Vivillon at level 12, but even for an early game Pokemon, surely Scatterbug could have better stats and moves than those. Yungoos, Pokemon Sun and Moon. In all honesty, Yungoos boasts a better attack power than most Pokemon you can get super early. It'll be able to make Bite a lethal attack before you can even get it to evolve into Gumshoes. The problem is that Yungoos tries a little too hard to be the rogue Pokemon, if you catch our drift. While the attack and speed stats are nice, the super low stats in defense and special defense mean Yungoos can go down pretty easily if the opposing Pokemon boasts the same amount of speed. Even when evolved into Gumshoes, the defense stats don't go up super high. Consider Yungoos a temporary addition to your team, if anything. Rookidee, Pokemon Sword and Shield. Astonishing how we've gone through the majority of the list without dunking on a single bird-like Pokemon, huh? We were considering Pidgey, Spearow, and some others at one point, but of all the bird Pokemon across each generation, Gen 8 had the worst with Rookidee. Awful amount of HP, abysmal defense, even worse special stats, and the worst learn set to suffer through until it evolves at level 18. Aside from filling out the Pokedex, what reason does anyone have to catch this lump of feathers? Just to get Corviknight? Dude, just hang around Hammerlock Hills and catch yourself a Corvisquire. There's no need for a Rookidee at that point. Quaxly, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. The value behind Quaxly is purely tied to its potential in evolving into Quaxwell and Quaquaval as soon as possible. Frankly, Quaxly doesn't have abysmal stats like most of our other entries, yet why exactly is it the weakest Pokemon of Gen 9? Well, the learn set isn't exactly the greatest, it's manageable, but still poor. As for its passive ability, Torrent, well, why does Quaxly have this? For those who don't know, Torrent boosts the user's attack stat when their HP is low, and how often is Quaxly on low HP versus straight up dead? Not often enough. So do yourself a favor and just try to catch a Quaxwell later. You don't need a Quaxly. What's the worst Pokemon you've caught? Did it make our list? Let us know down in the comments, and be sure to subscribe to MojoPlays for more great videos every day.